Story 1. The client's spare key. It was supposed to be just another paid night. But when the client told me to use a spare key instead of the front entrance, I should have known nothing about this job was normal. It was 11:45 p.m. when I pulled up outside the glass tower. The kind of place where the lobby smells like polished marble and every doorman wears a smile you know is forced. My client had told me not to bother with the front desk. Use the spare key, he'd said, like it was no big deal. Except the key he handed me earlier that night looked, and used, too clean. Like it had been sitting in a drawer longer than either of us had been alive. I'm not paranoid, at least I don't think so. I've done enough late-night calls in apartments like this to know the drill. Nod at the concierge, ride the elevator, get paid, keep quiet. But skipping the front desk meant no cameras, no record of me being here. And slipping that cold little key into the side entrance made me feel less like a guest and more like an accomplice. The hallway upstairs was silent, carpet swallowing every step. When I slid the key into the apartment door, it turned too smoothly, like the lock had been waiting for it. I stepped inside, and before I could even drop my bag, the door swung shut on its own. A soft click followed, a lock engaging from the outside. I froze, palm hovering near the handle, but pulling it did nothing. It was locked. I told myself maybe the wind had nudged it. Maybe the latch was just old. Still, the taste of metal spread in my mouth as I stood there, trying not to look like someone who had just lost control of the situation. My client waved me in from the living room with a calm smile, like nothing unusual had happened. I wanted to laugh it off, but the sound caught in my throat. I tried to focus on the setting: glass walls, spotless counters, the kind of sterile luxury that feels more like a showroom than a home. He poured us drinks, talking about nothing, his tone rehearsed. I was nodding along when I heard it, a soft creak from down the hall. Not pipes. Not the fridge. It was the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps on carpet. I glanced at him, expecting some sign that he'd noticed too, but he just kept talking. His glass didn't even tremble in his hand. The sound came again, heavier this time, from the guest bedroom. My skin prickled. I forced a grin, muttering something sarcastic about rich neighbors and thin walls. But the truth was, those steps were inside this apartment. I set my drink down, pretending to stretch just to catch another angle of the hallway. The guest room door was closed, but I swear the faintest shadow moved across the gap at the bottom. My client leaned closer, his voice low, almost conspiratorial, like he was finally about to explain. Instead he whispered, "They said you'd come." His words slid out too calm, too certain. Before I could process that, he stood abruptly and headed for the door. He didn't look back, didn't laugh it off. He just reached for the handle, tugging at it like he expected it to open for him and him alone. But I knew it was locked from the outside. Watching him pull uselessly at the door, my stomach dropped. It wasn't just me who was trapped in there. I told him to stop playing around, but my voice cracked. He didn't answer. He just kept pulling on that handle until his breathing turned ragged. Then, from the dark hallway, the guest room door eased open. No footsteps this time. Just silence, thick and deliberate. My chest tightened as the air seemed to shift toward us. He finally let go of the door, backing away like a man who'd just seen a ghost. "Don't look at them," he muttered, more to himself than to me. My body wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The apartment was a glass cage, lights reflecting off every surface, and somewhere in that reflection I felt eyes fixed on me. I forced myself toward the hall, each step slower than the last. The guest room door was wide now, a dark mouth opening into nothing. I could feel the weight of someone waiting just inside, their silence heavier than footsteps could ever be. My client pressed himself against the far wall, whispering a prayer or maybe just gibberish. And in that moment I thought, would you have trusted that key? The next morning I replayed the building's security feed in my head. The lobby cameras never showed him, not once. Just me, walking in alone at 11:45 p.m., clutching a spare key that wasn't supposed to exist. And now, every time I see a door click shut behind me, I wonder if it's really the wind, or if someone else is locking me inside again. Story 2. Room 23, 2:10 a.m. A roadside motel. One door painted with a number that shouldn't exist. 2:10 a.m. The neon sign outside the roadside motel flickered weakly, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. I was already tired, too tired to think about anything other than getting the job done and heading home. But when I walked along the row of doors, I noticed something odd. Every room had a neat brass number plate, except one. Its number, 23, looked hand-painted, the digits uneven and dripping slightly as if someone had scrawled them in haste. I paused, staring at the crooked plate nailed into the wood. The edges of the door frame bore faint scratches, shallow but deliberate, like something, or someone, had clawed at it. My first thought was maintenance neglect, but it didn't sit right. The other doors looked clean, cared for. This one looked wrong. I shook it off, telling myself not to overthink. Clients had weird preferences sometimes. Maybe this one liked mystery. When I reached the front desk, a man in a faded baseball cap was already there, leaning on the counter. His voice was low but tense. "You don't rent that room anymore, right?" "Not since..." He stopped mid-sentence, glancing at me, then back at the clerk. The clerk's smile tightened. "Sir, we don't have a room 23. The man pressed, frustration rising, but the clerk shook his head firmly. "You must be mistaken. We only go up to 22. My stomach tightened. I almost laughed because I knew damn well what I had seen, the messy black digits painted on the door. Still, I didn't speak up. I just slid my ID across the counter, giving the name my client had booked under. The clerk glanced at the card, then at me, and for a fraction of a second his eyes lingered too long. Finally, he handed me the key without a word. I found the door again easily, that uneven 23, seeming darker under the flickering hallway light. My client opened it before I could knock twice. He was middle-aged, neatly dressed, but his eyes darted past me, scanning the empty corridor. Without a word, he ushered me inside and closed the door fast, sliding the bolt with trembling hands. The smell of stale smoke and cheap cleaner clung to the air. "Lock it," he whispered. "Both chains. Don't leave a crack." His voice shook as though he'd repeated that line 100 times before. I hesitated, then obeyed, sliding one chain, then the other, hearing the sharp clicks echo in the silence. I told myself this was just part of his act, maybe some role play. But the way his hands trembled as he poured himself a drink didn't feel like any performance I'd seen. I tried to distract myself with routine, small talk, slipping off my jacket, setting my bag on the chair. But every sound in that room felt amplified. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint creak of the headboard when I shifted my weight. My client sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, drink untouched, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to move. Finally, I asked what was wrong. He flinched, like I'd broken some unspoken rule, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just stay quiet. Don't open it. No matter what." His gaze flicked to the crooked chains above the knob, then back to me. That smile lingered too long, and I couldn't tell if it was reassurance or desperation. The knock came soft at first, like a child testing boundaries. My client froze, glass shaking in his hand. Another knock followed, heavier, deliberate. I whispered, "Do you want me to?" But he cut me off with a sharp shake of his head. His lips moved soundlessly. "Don't." The knocking grew louder, each thud rattling the crooked plate outside. I could almost picture it shifting against the door, the nails straining. My pulse thudded in sync with the sound. He pressed a finger to his lips, eyes wide with terror. I'd been in bad rooms before, but never one where silence felt like the only thing keeping us alive. I don't remember falling asleep, only that the knocking stopped at some point, replaced by a humming silence that pressed against my ears. When I finally opened my eyes, pale light seeped through the thin curtains. The bed beside me was empty. My client was gone, his glass tipped over on the carpet. The chains hung loose, swaying slightly, though no window was open. The door itself stood wide, the hall beyond unnaturally still. The painted plate, the crooked 23, was missing, leaving only splintered holes where the nails had been. I stood there, barefoot on the cold carpet, staring at that blank wood. My throat tightened with a thought I couldn't swallow. Would you have stepped inside that room? Story 3. Rearview, 3:30 a.m. A deserted highway. I glanced at my rearview mirror, and the empty back seat moved. It was 3:30 in the morning when I pulled out of the club parking lot. Empty highway, yellow lines stretching into nothing. My client sat in the back, arms crossed, eyes darting, not at me, not at the road, but at the rearview mirror. Every few seconds he'd lean forward, scanning it like the glass could betray him. I'd driven plenty of nervous men before. Usually it was about their wives or their wallets or their guilty conscience. But this one wasn't looking at me with shame. He was watching the back seat. My back seat. And when I caught his gaze in the mirror, he shook his head quick, like he wanted me to stop checking too. I adjusted the mirror once just to make him settle down. But the second I let go, it tilted back like someone nudged it from behind. The glass caught a sliver of the empty seat. Only it didn't look empty for long. A shadow shifted across the leather, faint as breath on a window. I told myself it was the passing streetlight. He saw it too. His hand gripped the headrest so tight his knuckles turned pale. "Don't touch the mirror again," he muttered, voice shaking like he'd been rehearsing that line all night. I wanted to laugh, to call him paranoid, but the way he leaned back, shoulders trembling, made my throat go dry. The highway was dead quiet, just the hum of my tires and the low buzz of the radio. Then headlights appeared in the distance, closing in faster than they should have. I switched lanes just to give space, but the lights followed. Every move I made, they mirrored. Too close, too deliberate. "Don't slow down," my passenger whispered. His voice barely carried over the engine, but there was something final in it, like an order. He was leaning forward again, not looking at the road, not even at the car behind us. His eyes were locked on the mirror, wide, wet, and unblinking. I pressed harder on the gas, the engine straining, but the glow stayed fixed in the glass. Too perfect. Too steady. My palms were slick on the wheel, and every breath felt shallow, like the air itself didn't want to be in the car with us. The mirror trembled slightly with the vibrations, but the shape in the back seat stayed still, darker than it should have been. "Listen," I said, forcing my voice flat. "If this is some kind of setup, you picked the wrong guy." He didn't answer. His reflection stared back at me, lips parted, shaking his head so slightly I almost missed it. When I risked a glance over my shoulder, the seat was bare. But in the mirror, something leaned closer, just behind his shoulder. The headlights surged closer, flooding the cabin with white. I couldn't see the license plate, couldn't even make out the shape of the car, just a wall of light glued to my rear bumper. My client slid lower in the seat, clutching his knees like a kid. "Don't let them pass," he hissed, eyes locked on the mirror. "Whatever you do, don't." My chest tightened. I flicked my blinker and darted into the next lane. Instantly, the lights shifted with me, perfect timing, like they'd been waiting. The mirror shook again, tilting just enough for me to see it. The empty seat rippled, leather creasing under invisible weight, as though someone shifted their posture right there behind me. "Don't stop," he whispered, so low I almost thought it was the radio. His breath hit the back of my neck, though he was still pressed against the far door. "If they pass us, we're both done." His eyes weren't on the road anymore. They were on me. And in the mirror, something else was watching too. Something that smiled where no one sat. I never saw the car overtake us. I just remember pulling into a gas station hours later, hands locked on the wheel, throat raw from breathing too hard. Cameras caught me stepping out alone, trembling under the fluorescent lights. But I swear I wasn't the only one in that car. Would you have kept driving? Story 4. The locker code. At 1 a.m. in a private club's locker room, I was told to store my client's clothes in a locker that already had a code set. When the padlock clicked open on its own later that night, I realized it wasn't just his clothes locked inside. It was just past 1 a.m. when I walked into the locker room of the private club. The place was dim, lit by recessed lights that hummed more than they glowed. My client pointed to a row of gray lockers and handed me a code scribbled on the back of a drink napkin. "Put my things in there," he said, nodding at number 17. When I got closer, I froze. The padlock on the door was already shut tight, digits lined up perfectly. The same code he'd written down. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe the club reused locks or maybe he'd reserved it in advance. Still, I hesitated. When I touched the locker handle, a faint metallic smell clung to my fingers, sharp and coppery, almost like dried blood. The odor stayed even after I rubbed my hands against my jeans. I stuffed his clothes inside anyway, twisting the padlock back into place, but I couldn't shake the thought that someone had been here before us. The lounge was louder than the locker room, low music pulsing under conversations that were too soft to follow. I tried to act normal, sliding into the velvet seat beside my client, but my eyes kept drifting back toward the hallway. From where I sat, I could still see the lockers through the open door. And I wasn't the only one looking. A man stood near the bar, not drinking, not speaking, just staring. His gaze didn't move over the room like everyone else's. It locked onto a single point, locker number 17. I shifted in my seat, waiting for him to glance away, to prove I was imagining it. He didn't. He just watched, like he was waiting for it to open. When I finally excused myself to use the bathroom, I walked past the lockers again. The hallway was empty now, and the air felt colder than before. As I reached for the door to steady myself, the sound cut through the silence. A sharp metallic click. My eyes dropped instantly to locker 17. The padlock hung open, the shackle swung loose like someone had just pulled it free. I hadn't touched it. No one else was there. For a moment, I thought maybe I hadn't closed it right earlier, but the code wheel still lined up perfectly, as if the lock had obeyed on its own. I pushed the shackle back into place, my hands trembling, and hurried toward the lounge without looking back. Back in the lounge, I reached for my bag under the table. My phone should have been right there, wedged beside my wallet. Instead, there was only empty fabric and the faint impression of where it had been. My chest tightened. I dug deeper, pulling everything out, but the phone was gone. Completely gone. I whispered to my client that I needed to check the locker. He smiled, slow and deliberate, and shook his head. "No need," he said. "You don't need it tonight." The way he said it, not playful, not casual. Final. Like he already knew I wouldn't find it. My throat went dry, but I nodded anyway, pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I wasn't trapped. The music seemed louder after that, like it was pressing into my ears, drowning out my own thoughts. Every time I shifted in my seat, I caught my client watching me instead of the room. His eyes calm, unblinking, as if he was measuring how much I'd resist. I wanted to ask for my phone, to demand it back, but the words stayed locked behind my teeth. The man from the bar was gone now, and somehow that felt worse. When my client excused himself to the restroom, I finally stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I forced them down the hallway. The lockers waited in silence, rows of steel doors catching the dim light. Number 17 seemed darker than the rest, like the air around it was thicker. I reached for the padlock again, desperate, needing proof my phone was inside. The lock was shut tight, and the code had been scrambled. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the lounge, pretending to relax, waiting for the minutes to crawl toward morning. By the time the first rays of light filtered through the blinds, my client was gone, and so was the strange calm in the room. I hurried back down the hallway, heart pounding with each step, praying my phone would still be there. But when I reached locker 17, it was sealed again. A brand new padlock, heavy and spotless, clamped over the handle. The digits were spun to random numbers I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I tried them anyway, one by one, knowing it was pointless. The smell of metal lingered in the air, stronger than before. I walked out without my phone, without looking back. "What? You have left your things in there?" Story 5. Cigarette break, 12:30 a.m. A cigarette. A stranger's balcony. And a lighter engraved with my initials, though I'd never seen it before. 12:30 a.m. I was standing on the balcony of a high-rise apartment, trying to look relaxed, trying not to think about the clock. The city spread out below in streaks of orange and blue light. My client leaned against the railing with a cigarette dangling between his fingers, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment all night. He told me he never liked smoking alone. Then he handed me a lighter, silver, heavy, smooth. My initials were engraved on the side. I froze. The letters weren't just close to mine, they were exact, same order, same serif edges. My first thought was coincidence. People share names, right? But I don't know anyone else who carries DM etched into their lighter. He didn't comment. Just flipped the lid open with that crisp metal click. Shut it. Click. Shut it. The flame never appeared. The sound started to crawl under my skin. Click, shut. Click, shut. He wasn't even trying to light the cigarette anymore, just watching me with a kind of quiet patience. The balcony felt smaller with each snap of metal. I finally reached out, maybe just to stop the noise, maybe to take control of something. When I slipped the lighter into my pocket, I expected him to smirk or protest. Instead, his voice came low, almost casual. It's already yours. No smile, no wink, just flat certainty. My hand tightened around the lighter in my pocket. The night air felt sharper, colder. I glanced through the glass into the living room, wondering how quickly I could excuse myself, when a light flicked on in the building opposite. One window, one square of pale yellow, and in the middle of it, a long shadow pointing straight at our balcony. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just the way curtains throw shapes. But the shadow didn't move with the fabric. It held there, rigid, arm extended, like someone frozen mid-gesture. My client didn't turn to look. He just inhaled, unlit cigarette still between his lips, like he could taste the smoke that wasn't there. My chest tightened. I wanted the night to end. I slid the balcony door halfway open, testing it with my shoulder. It caught on the frame with a dull scrape, like it hadn't been opened in years. I tugged harder. It barely budged. Behind me, the click, shut began again, slower this time. My reflection in the glass looked pale, strained, as if I were the one trapped outside. I turned back to him, ready to say I needed to leave, that I didn't feel well. He was watching me now, eyes steady, lighter balanced in his palm. Funny thing about doors, he murmured. Sometimes they stay shut even when they shouldn't. He pressed his thumb against the wheel, and for the first time a spark flared, then died instantly, like the flame refused him too. The shadow across the way bent, shifting in a way that made no sense. Longer, closer, reaching over the balcony rail, though it belonged to a room 30 feet away. I stumbled back until my spine touched the cold glass. He didn't move to help, didn't move at all. The lighter lid snapped closed again. That sound swallowed the night. I shoved the door hard, both hands, shoulders shaking with the effort. It rattled in its track but didn't give. The glass fogged with my breath as I pressed my forehead against it. Behind me, the city felt silent, too silent. No car horns, no sirens, just the faint rasp of his thumb rolling the lighter's wheel again and again. "Would you have lit that cigarette?" he asked softly, like it mattered more than anything else. My hand was still in my pocket, fingers curled around the metal I thought I'd taken. But when I pulled it out, it was empty. My jacket weighed heavier though, like something had been slipped back in when I wasn't looking. I spun toward him, but the balcony was empty. Just the railing, the skyline, and the faint smell of smoke that shouldn't have been there. The door slid open with sudden ease, no resistance at all. I stumbled inside, slammed it shut, and didn't look back. I left without another word, without my payment, without breathing until I hit the street. The next morning when I reached for my jacket, I felt it immediately, a weight in the lining. I pulled out the same silver lighter. My initials glinted in the morning sun, cold and clean like it had never been touched. I swear I never took it. I swear I left it behind. But it's here now. And I can't stop asking myself, Would you have lit that cigarette?